Dr. Hill, thanks for
Uh,
joining.
oh, it's my pleasure, Adelita. How are you today?
I'm great. So today
Good.
I'm here with Dr. Hill. He is one of the top peak performance coaches in the world,
Ah,
and he holds a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from UCLA Department of Psychology. So he's a neuroscientist trained by UCLA, a neuroscience department. Um, and he continues to do research in cognition through neurofeedback training, EEG, QEEG, and is also the owner of Peak Brain Institute, founder owner. He has several locations around the country, and he also works with remote clients.
mm.
So thanks for coming.
Oh, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's such a pleasure to have you because in the field of neuroscience, I think to me, like you were the very top of the food chain and you've been doing this for how long?
Certainly in the human focused, like applied neuroscience world, I'm a little unusual, but I've been doing this professionally, like after my PhD, for about 10 years, a little over 10 years, in terms of running companies and doing this peak brain kinds of things. But I've been working in the field with brains for a long time, for more like uh, 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 gosh, 30 years. So quite a while.
30 years, 30 years. And growing up in your family, did you grow up with like academia parents? Were your parents into graduate studies and they're heavy into learning and cognition?
Yeah, they weren't academics, but they
Mhm.
were sort of intellectuals, like
Mhm.
I grew up in the Northeast in Maine and Boston area and very very like about consuming information and understanding science and a very intellectual style, encouraging intellectual pursuits. My sister went on and got a master's in math. And taught for a while. I think I might be, if I'm forgetting, my parents gonna be annoyed, but I might be the first person to get a PhD in my family, which is fun, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think that the environment that you grew up, it seems like it helped you pursue academia and achieve at such a high level.
I did. I mean, I had certainly the privileges to go through academics and to, I grew up in the Northeast and was able to come to UCLA, one of the best psych schools in the country. I shouldn't forget, I do have an aunt and uncle who are both neuroscientists. So they
Oh, okay. Runs in
I,
the
it
family,
does run the
definitely.
family a little bit. Yeah. My dad's sister's a neuroscientist and her husband is too, up in Michigan at Alma College. But I went through health and human services, working with everything from inpatient developmental disability to drug addiction to aging to child inpatient crisis work for several years. And then I went back to grad school and got a degree studying this cognitive neuroscience stuff and using the tools of EEG and attention assessment and things to understand how brains work a bit better. And then from
Yeah,
that, I did the peak brain stuff.
yes, it's a fantastic journey, really. I've been following. I know you've been at the Joe Rogan podcast and all the
Mm,
biohacking podcasts. You kind of like a well-known figure in the field of biohacking, neuroscience, and a very public person, and has helped many people, thousands of people, remotely all over the
mm.
world. So I was just curious to see, like, what was your experience like as a student and a professor at UCLA?
Mm. So I was at UCLA for a while, first getting my PhD, and like many grad students, you start teaching. And I was a lecturer for over a dozen years there, and I did a lot of work. I found some of the stuff that I ended up teaching just because there was courses available or because it was somewhat interesting to me, became areas that I either really enjoyed sort of dabbling in or became things I did a lot of. So for instance, I'd had some experience working with inpatient geriatrics and geriatric psych and stuff. And I'd seen a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia stuff, professionally before grad school. but I ended up teaching for several years a course on aging. UCLA has a really interesting program for their freshmen. They keep them in a cluster for several classes across a topic. And they have several like liberal arts style things you can do where you stick with the same 100, 200 kids the whole year. And we
Wonderful.
have an aging cluster at UCLA that I taught in for
Mm.
years I had a fellowship to teach there. And I was somewhat interested in aging and gerontology and geriatrics and things before that. But after doing 3 courses a year for years and years and years, I ended up teaching really specialized courses in aging brain and healthy brain performance. And the courses ranged across everything from politics and sociology and psychology and development. And so really it sort of made me before grad school, I had a lot of experience with children and developmental stuff and autism and ADHD and childhood type, difficulties that are broad. And then I got a really serious grounding in the science of aging by teaching. And then ironically, sort of as an aside, I'm grateful right now that I taught this course for a few years with a professor named Paul Abramson at UCLA. The course was titled Sex and the Law. So I learned all about all of the constitutional cases and all of the progressions in this country for the past 100+ years that led to sort of the penumbra of the privacy rights expanding to things like free speech and who you can marry and privacy of sex and things like that. So it's really interesting right now in the summer we're in to see sort of the Supreme Court doing random things that are striking at all those laws. And I feel like as a neuroscientist, I have an oddly direct perspective because I taught students for years through, I was a TA for Paul Abramson teaching sex and the law. Learned an awful lot. So grad school is a rich thing. It's not just about, I mean, the joke about a PhD is that you go to grad school and you learn more and more about less and
Mm-hmm.
less until you know everything about nothing, essentially. You hyper focus. But I found that because I was there for a while teaching courses and getting deep, that my perspective as an academic, instructor became really broad with the gerontology and the neuroscience. And I did, modeling and research courses for teaching, lots of great skills. But then I would pick up these courses and teach for a few years here and there in these other topics like sex and the law. And I found that,
Wow.
you don't think of grad school as like an enriching, it's like undergrad has like liberal arts and the other stuff. But I was surprised at how much I rounded out my academic experience broadly by going to grad school, which wasn't why I went. I went to like learn how neurofeedback works because no one knew how it works. We still don't have a clear sense deeply of how it all works. But
Still.
before I went to grad school, we were sort of blind men and elephants, all claiming that we knew how it worked, and those ideas were not reconcilable. All the schools of thought in the neuroscience area didn't agree with how neurofeedback could be working, and yet the software packages that had those approaches all had great results. So there was something missing. And I went back to grad school and did, actually for my dissertation, I did one of the first, I think it was the first placebo-controlled double-blind study of neurofeedback, looking at how the brain's binding to the information of neurofeedback in real time, like how the actual loop is established between your brain and the computer, so the brain can be moved by the exercise, because that wasn't understood before that. And so I combined things. No one had done a placebo-controlled experiment before, and no one had done the actual established the learning loop, so to speak. So I had some fun in grad school, putting some stakes in the ground with science. And
Mm-hmm.
then as I was finishing up, decided to not pursue the academic, ivory tower route, and moved into clinical practice and opening companies, entrepreneurial stuff, biohacking. And other biohackers who are listening will know the first biohacking company I helped start, which is called True Brain, which is a nootropic company here in Santa Monica. And then at the same time, I was launching a center in Beverly Hills, which was mixed brain and addiction. And the brain side kind of outgrew the just addiction side after the first couple of years. And then we split off into Peak Brain in Culver City. And that first branded Peak Brain was coming up on 7 years ago or something now. And we have other Peak Brains. Peak Brain, of course, is brain mapping and neurofeedback. And we have them in Orange County, New York City, St. Louis, Missouri, and some overseas partners. But I think you may have mentioned on the intro, we also work a lot with remote clients. And so I went from an academic teaching courses about, these things into essentially a coach, because even though I am sort of Dr. Hill, I'm really in this role of coach and scientist for people, not really, interventionist the way a doctor is. My goal is not to create sort of this container and then do transference the way a psychologist does and sort of work through things, nor is my goal to be your expert and have the right answer for you, like your serious medical doctor might. You need the answer, you see the doctor. I want to unmix and demystify and explore the brain with people so they can understand themselves better, decide to transform, go after strategies to transform, and then use more neuroscience tools to further demystify. So on the neuroscience side, and you and I have experienced some of that together, you get into your brain, you dig into it, you learn some things, you go after some transformation, push the brain around and transform. It's very similar to picking up a skill. Maybe after you have an injury for a match or something, you have to do some rehab on a shoulder, or you learn a new hold and you have to practice it a bunch before it becomes second nature as a strategy you can use in real time, so to speak. So neurofeedback training the brain is really similar to training the body, even though it's not really a voluntary process. It is sort of iterative and progressive, and resources change. So I moved into what I call functional neuroscience, where I'm teaching people to take control of their neuro. And we started at the top, obviously, but we tend to do a lot of coaching around bottom-up stuff, or teaching people to work on the neuroscience of the body to control the brain, which includes things like hacking the sleep cycle, activity, playing with macronutrient or food timing, working with ketones, doing all that other sort of broad biohacking. I do all of that hacking the body to support the best performance in the brain, or to address difficulties perhaps.
So for people that are just listening about this for the first time, like, what is neurofeedback and what is the process if I were to engage with you and say, hey, I want to understand this, I want to understand my brain, I want to perform better for work, for life, and for my physicality. So how would that
sure
look like?
So we do what's called brain mapping or quantitative EEGs, and we also do neurofeedback, or pushing the brain around and exercising it. And the peak brains all operate like a club, where if you're near one of them, you can pay a small fee and your listeners get a half price club membership. And then you have access to mapping your brain throughout the year without charge. And the science team will do a couple of consults teaching you to dig through your data and read it. So that's the club membership level. We have mindfulness groups and other sort of healthy habit, pro health stuff we do. But then a lot of our clients will do neurofeedback and train the brain 3 times a week. And you can do that in one of our offices or from home. If you're working from home, we send you equipment and the coaches work with you to teach you to stick a cap on your head for the QEEG and stick just a couple of wires in your head for the training sessions. And then we give all of our clients live support in real time, 7 days a week as they're setting up, so they can set up at home and ask for some help placing a wire or something on their head. But generally, people come in first and do a brain map or a quantitative EEG, which again is a cap on the head. You squirt it full of gel. It's painless, but a little annoying, especially because you have to come in uncaffeinated generally to get a clean map. Although I do lots and lots of maps that are first baseline clean maps, and then maps that are caffeinated, Adderall, cannabis, pre-workout, whatever. And you see huge, interesting things. The person really, whose brain it is, really finds that super useful generally to understand, oh, wait, my Adderall wakes me up, but I'm more anxious, or I'm less accurate, or whatever. Or my caffeine has these mixed effects on my stress and sleep. So you can sort of navigate your brain with more information. I mean, it's kind of like having a good sense of your lipid panel, and then you can watch your triglycerides, change your Ben and Jerry's habit, and have the triglycerides drop and go, nice.
You see it.
And you get
can
control
tell.
over it. You aren't going, oh, cholesterol. You're going, triglycerides. And you learn to like go after a metric, make an intervention, and then measure it and iterate. So this is why I call it functional neuroscience. It's very similar to functional fitness, where you're like, hey, I have a skill or a limit or a thing, and you work on the complex skill, you work on the functional movement thing until you rebuild it. And it's not about the thing, but the system you're working on in general. So
it reminds me of like functional medicine, functional doctor, functional medicine. Is it kind of related? Because I tend to kind of go that route.
I think so, a little bit, because functional medicine docs are generally looking for shapes of data, trying to figure out a thing that might be related without knowing necessarily the discrete piece of it. And that's a lot of neuroscience is here's a feature of your data. It may be relevant. Let's see is sort of our approach. So I really consider neurofeedback and the sort of functional neuroscience stuff closer to personal training than to medicine or psychology. It uses tools from neuroscience, tools from psychology, tools from medicine sometimes. But the practice of it, this iterative, client-focused, goal-focused, measurement-focused thing is closer to physical therapy or personal training or occupational therapy or something. It's not really a medicine versus not done to you. It's something you're doing to yourself with guidance and skill. Yeah. So folks come in and get a brain map, and then I work with them a few days later on Zoom usually and dig into their data and teach them about how to read maps.
Whoa, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that if I come to your clinic and do a brain map, I can have like a one-on-one consultation with you and you go over the details, right? I actually done like many sessions.
Yeah. You of course interned with us and worked with us and learned how to do it. And so you got me directly, but everyone gets me initially at least once. They get me helping them understand this. We're a pretty big worldwide company, but we do, I do make time for every client to work through brain mapping and teach them about it.
I think this is the most valuable piece because I mean, you must have spent, like I spent a lot of money on like school and like improving myself, like, you know, 200,000 plus 250,000. I bet you probably double that if, right? I don't know. Plus all the equipment, all the experience, the time that you put in, it's like $1 million worth of like, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So
probably.
Anyone has access to $1 million worth of knowledge, experience,
and
training,
technology.
UCLA trained neuroscientist for like a small fee. So I think that people don't know that that's possible. They don't know they can have their own UCLA trained neuroscientist. So I'd like to make this very clear and very available that it's very affordable. And then you have all the data in front of you and you can see the changes. There's no guesswork. Like, I don't know if this works for me. Maybe it works for other people. Sometimes you enroll in things and buy programs like a gym membership or like a coaching thing, and then you don't know if it's gonna work. But there's no guesswork. So I'd like to see, would you be up for like maybe like showing my brain maps?
Sure.
Maybe like commenting, like I did one brain map before I start working with you guys. I've done like now maybe 35 sessions or more. Yeah. But I started with 0. We did a brain map. What does my brain look like?
Yeah. Right? So we map the brain every 20, 25 sessions. We map the brain and we work on goals and push brainwaves around using biofeedback and create change. We create experiential change. It feels like something generally. And then we measure the brain again to get the data again. So we have, for you, we have 2 sets of data.
Could you show it? Like,
sure.
So cool. Like live.
We have the beginning. Yeah, I'll pull it up.
My gosh.
We have the beginning map for you, which is baseline, and we have a map done at about 20 sessions of neurofeedback. And we're coming up. I think you've done closer to like 35 or almost 40 sessions. We usually grab another map about now for you. So we definitely should grab a second one for you at some point. But let me share my screen.
Let's see my results.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, let me open this up for you and open this up for you.
In the meantime, while you're doing that, I'd like to say, I'd like to thank like my sponsor, like NOOTOPIA. Like they have this new line of nootropics for brain, for cognition. Have you ever heard of NOOTOPIA?
I have actually. Yeah, I haven't tried their products, but I've heard of the company.
Yeah, I can definitely. If you want some, I can leave some for you. I hooked up all your staff. It's nice. Using it, so now they're gonna sell more. They're gonna work faster, and nice. I want
we can also look at what it does to the brain too. You know, it can keep your brain clean and with and without it, so to speak.
Absolutely, we would love to do some kind of testing about that with you. So NOOTOPIA.com, NOOTOPIAbrain.com.
So we pulled your brain up just now, and you're looking at lots of colored circles, which is your brain activity. And that's a little subtle, and I can get into it. But if folks that are looking at the video will see that there's lots of orange in the left-hand columns, which are slow brain waves called deltas and thetas. And slow brain wave is kind of where life is. The fast brain waves, the beta waves, are kind of the mind. And deltas and things are deep sleep and metabolism. And you had back in the spring an awful lot of delta waves and even theta waves, like a lubrication wave, behind the ears on both sides, especially. And the right side was really quite high. And often that means, now I should say to folks, when looking at brain maps, they're not diagnostically precise. We can't say, aha, it means this. We can say, aha, you're different than average in this way. And now let's come up with a plausible reason for it. Tell you what's often true. And we tend to get to things people care about that way. But it's not me saying, here's what's true for you. It's me saying, hey, here's what's plausible. Oh, that sounds real. Oh, okay. Let's go after it and see if we can make it move for you. Now, I do cheat a little bit. As you know, we also do a really boring attention test. That's kind of, I joke it's a lot of fun, but it's really not a lot of fun. The computer goes 1, 1, 1, and then 2s are interspersed. And your only job is to click for the 1 and resist the 2. So it's attention versus impulsivity, essentially. But we
Team
tease
1.
out team 1. Yeah, exactly. Click on the 1. So what we would do combining the brain map and the performance is sort of like using to frame ideas and hypotheses, because the brain maps show what's unusual and we can get some sense, but the performance is just performance. So for instance, here's your performance graph for the auditory system. And the left side of the test here, sorry, the left side is called attention. And attention is how well you can activate and grab stuff. When the 1 comes up, how well you can click. And the right-hand side of the test is called response control, and that's how well you can pump the brakes and not click. But initially, when I met you, your attention was an 82%. And the way this works on a bell curve is 100 is the middle of the bell curve, plus or minus 15 points. And things start to get in the way right around 85, about 1 standard deviation off the average, things can get in the way. And overall, your attention was about there. You were a little bit inattentive. But one of the great reasons to use this kind of test is because we can instantly see on this test, it's not actually like a spacey ADD or something, because the visual systems in the 90s and the auditory systems in the 70s. So this is an auditory issue, not an attention specific issue in some ways. And we can drill down further, these 3 little bars here. Your speed was typical, 98%. And your focus, grabbing boring stuff when it repeats, was 92, also fine. But vigilance, grabbing stuff when it changes gears, is only 48. So, several standard deviations of 3 to 4 off the mean. And that's in the way. That's going to be you not being as alert auditorily as you want, not being as quick, not responding to your partner quickly, or going, sorry, honey, what was that? I'm being a little bit like a beat late with auditory stuff. No issue in visual. So unlikely to impact you, for instance, in a competition or a match, because you're going to use mostly visual and proprioceptive skills and deeply learned premotor skills where you release complex motor patterns. You won't have to listen for that. It won't have any impact at all. But it will mean that you might bore pretty easily at the end of the day. Listen to boring, someone drone on, or a boring lecture when you're tired will be brutal, that kind of stuff. And that was coming in at 72% overall. That big bottleneck was about 2 standard deviations off the mean in the auditory. And we saw in the brain maps that the auditory system has a lot of deltas and theta waves right behind the ears. So this becomes a plausible thing to think about, that you get a lot of sluggish brain waves, especially behind the right ear. And you can see here on the left that it's orange, dark orange colors, and there's a bell curve color bar hanging out in the middle of the page here. And that dark orange is about 2.5 standard deviations more delta than is typical on the right-hand side of the head. And those red lines at the bottom suggest you're 2 to 3 standard deviations more stuck together, over connected, if you will, in those delta waves. And the experience of that, here would be the hypothesis for somebody. The experience of that is often brain fog and some listening difficulties. And we measured the auditory stuff. I know they're real. So I would go, oh, okay, this delta is probably plausible. At which point I would have gone and asked you, hey, are you experiencing some brain fog?
Yes.
Some other difficulties, that kind of stuff. And you were, exactly. You said, yeah, that sounds valid. At which point I was like, okay, checkbox. Let's add that to her list of things if she wants to work on that. I asked other questions, I'm sure, back then in the spring. Auditory stuff behind the ears can produce balance issues and can produce tinnitus or tinnitus, that ringing in the ears. So those things are things I would have asked about. And then I also see the beta waves are pretty hot in that same spot behind the right ear. And that's the tempoparietal junction. It's like a junction box for bringing things in. And when the beta gets high there, it's like you can't filter. I call this the princess and the P marker, where everything irritates you. So you have a couple of different flavor auditory things going on. One is not being crisp and grabbing stuff automatically. Like if you're reading a book, you won't like, you'll have to like shift gears to listen. And the second one is the opposite problem where it's hard to filter things out. And like the random sirens from 6 blocks away gets in, and a dog barking, 2 houses away, kind of, why is no one else bothered by that kind of stuff? Like, it's hard to filter. So I would
Yes,
have guessed
absolutely.
a bit of a rawness and a bit of a fog in that auditory system as a high level thing.
It's nice to be able to see this and to catch it when you're young, because I kind of imagine that as you get older, these things can get worse. Like it just continues to get worse
Yeah,
and worse.
it depends on what's causing it, right? I mean, if you have features in your brain that are foggy and in mild injuries, those can interact with aging to become worse. You can also have features in your brain involving big difficulties with attention, anxiety, or sleep. And those things are sort of day-to-day limits that will make your experience really uncomfortable and or will progress worse themselves, especially if your sleep is eroded. You'll dysregulate over time and won't handle things like stress, illness, performance very well at all. So I think it's useful to understand it, not because it's good or bad, but because you go like, oh, okay, yeah, makes sense to me. And then you can start to demystify what's going on and go after things. So we did train the sides of your head a fair amount over that first 20 sessions. And what you can see is behind the right ear, where you made huge amounts of delta before, there's a shadow of it left. You've made about 2 standard deviations of change in the delta in 20 sessions of neurofeedback, and about 2 to 2.5 of the theta. And with that, and you see the red lines have dropped away. So all the hypercoherent or stuck delta, the fog and stuff, has lifted. And all of this would suggest reduced brain fog, deeper sleep, and better auditory performance and maybe sensory, filtering is better as well. So all this I was hypothesizing about would have been better. We also see the beta waves were pretty hypercoherent before, and that usually means some generalized stress and poor deep sleep. So sister, you look kind of burnt out and not sleeping well and kind of stressed. And then there's a specific auditory thing, and knowing, your history and skill set and avocation, it's delta behind the ear is probably an old injury for you. I wouldn't normally say that because you don't know. It could be lots of things. Maybe you're built this way, but you've probably hit the mat hard once or twice or got your bell wrong once or twice. I'm just guessing. In all the journey you've gone through, there's probably a little bit of wear and tear, and brains experience that. Not a big deal, but you don't feel your brain. There's no sensory nerve endings in it. So you never know if your brain has got little bits of scar tissue, wear and tear, inflammation. You just don't know. But you can look at it on this kind of thing. And, I wouldn't know the delta in the sides of the head. I wouldn't know if it's from a concussion from a few years ago. It could also be something like COVID or chemotherapy or mold or Lyme. They all look very similar. It's like a foggy state. Or apnea or chronic stress and PTSD screwing with your sleep or mold exposure. They all look the same. They all look like fog. So it's plausible given history and given the focused nature of it that it's a mild injury, but it doesn't really affect how I would go after it. It doesn't, the cause of fog isn't important unless it's something keeping it going, basically.
So basically, the little the circles, when it's green, it's normal and it's
typical.
healthy.
Yeah, it's typical.
When it's red, as you can see that there's trauma, there's injury, there's like it's overactive or something.
Yeah,
And then when
overactive
it's
in beta
blue,
is stress, and overactive in the delta is like fog. So stress and fog.
right.
And then when things are more, the lines drop away and the green heads show up, you're moving more towards the average brain, which means you're waking the brain up, dropping that delta, relaxing the mind, dropping the beta, and sleeping more deeply.
Where do you see stress? What does it look like?
This beta here is hypercoherent. It's locked together.
Okay.
And it means it's not letting go. All the spots of the brain are talking to all the other spots of the brain all at once and not letting go of that beta wave, the gas pedal of the brain.
It's like busyness in my brain.
Yeah. And this particular pattern, everywhere connected, tends to produce, here would be the hypothesis for people, tends to produce a general stress and poor maintenance of sleep. Psychologists call this generalized anxiety with sleep disorder, but it's a very classic phenomenon, being on edge and not letting go of the world. So you're kind of a little bit easily woken up and don't fall back asleep super easily and kind of on edge, kind of anxious. Very classic, and it tends to blow up with that little sensory area too. It's kind of a giftedness thing, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of sleep crap, where it's interrupted easily. And you also have all of the awareness and your mind works super fast and you have all the feels. It's sort of that kind of brain. It's a bit of a gifted, brilliant, but kind of a hot brain that you have. I don't mean that to objectify. I mean, like it's running kind of hot. It's a powerful but also a bit of an anxious brain. That's what happens when you run really fast, is you tend to have brilliance and anxiety at the same time. And the degree to which you can remain in control of it is the degree to which you're comfortable, you know? So
yes, it's so fascinating because we also did a brain scan. This is great for kids to see like how your children are doing.
oh,
And
we
when
did
we
one on
look
your,
at
that's
my
what's right.
son's
That's right.
brain, we can see some similar patterns. I don't know if you
That's
recall, but
right.
he was very gifted. He was
Yeah,
amazing at
all that fast
attention.
and gifted stuff is there for both
Mm-hmm.
him and you. So we were like,
Yes,
aha, it's both you guys. Now,
yes,
just to close the loop on your data,
sure.
we saw the auditory system in the brain change by 2.5 standard deviations behind the ears.
It's
And here
incredible.
you see the
Mm-hmm.
auditory system after 20 sessions of training is a 99 versus
Mm-hmm.
the 72. So you made about 2 standard deviations improvement in the big bottlenecks in your auditory system in the first 6 or 8 weeks. And the alertness aspect, which is called vigilance, grabbing new
Mm-hmm.
stuff, was a 48% initially, and now it's 108. So it's half a standard deviation above average now. You've changed by 4 standard deviations in the most acute bottleneck, probably from an old injury. And my hunch is that actually something you notice. You probably feel a little more present auditorily, or your partner is not as frustrated because you're not lagging responding or something. I haven't asked you this, but are you, and to put me on the spot and Peak Brand on the spot, are you noticing any difference in how you perform auditorily?
Yeah, it's noticeable that to my partner
It is.
and that I'm more present. Like there's like more emotional regulation and
Okay. That's the beta waves. Not so you aren't like your foot isn't on the gas pedal of your emotions anymore quite as much.
not as
So
much.
it's great.
There's a lot of improvement. It's really crucial for me, the auditory portion and
Well, sure,
the
as a
attention.
coach and as
As
a
a coach,
wellness
as a
provider, yeah,
therapist, like I
yeah,
need to be
yeah,
able to listen. Like so,
yeah.
my listening is improving, and my focus is improving. So sometimes people may think that you come across as like you're not paying attention or that you're maybe like aloof or something, but sometimes you see that's why you shouldn't judge. It's like it's not the person's personality, it's like something in their brain that
Yeah.
it's not firing correctly, it's not working right. So yeah,
Absolutely.
so some
And this is
compassion, some empathy for everybody
and
out there.
hopefully it lets you have some self-compassion. I mean, if I show you the little injury on one side and you have some tinnitus,
Mm-hmm.
some balance issues, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
people sometimes their relationship with their brain suddenly changes because they see the problem and go, oh, it's my brain, especially with like anxiety features, the front midline for obsession, the back midline for
Right.
threat sensitivity. When you see it and you're like, oh, it's my brain and it's not a
Mm-hmm.
disease, it's a natural resource. It's kind of cramped like a muscle that's spasmed.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly you can stop being guilty and feeling ashamed. You can be
Yeah,
frustrated,
you can
but you don't have to be mad at yourself.
externalize
Yeah, you can
the
go function. It's
problem.
functional now, not my
Yeah,
fault. And it
exactly.
starts to become very obvious. And you can also tease things apart. You know, people come in all the time with like an ADHD diagnosis and they have, when you look at their brain and their performance, they don't see ADHD. You see like a big sleep issue and anxiety fighting, or you see a concussion. So you can tease apart the actual physiological stuff without relying on which label someone's giving you, which is kind of fun. So you drop below the labels to some extent looking at this stuff.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I just wanted to kind of understand who are your clients? Who is your ideal client?
Yeah,
What kind of people that are looking for this? What kind of people benefit the most from neurofeedback
sure. My marketing guys hate this, but it only works on
training?
people that have brains. Like that's our segment.
It's
uh
true.
it's just too broad. We tend to have 3 types of clients. One type I would call classic neurofeedback clients, and
Mm-hmm.
those are a lot of autism, ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
seizures, migraines, concussions, childhood development stuff and brain injury stuff. Alcoholism's in that same category. These are things that are very impactful. Neurofeedback is really impactful for seizures, migraines, alcohol cravings,
Wow.
ADHD, all that stuff. Yeah, and then all the flavors of anxiety. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's another third is like normal stuff that's gotten really in the way. And that includes sleep issues and chronic stress and maybe some old trauma history, but it's the complete person trying to optimize. It isn't necessarily like a, specific problem. And then we have a whole nother third category, which are peak performers. We work an awful lot. I would say more than most practices that do neurofeedback. We work with musicians, athletes, actors, creatives of all stripes, high level CEOs who are trying to squeeze out a little more performance or shift from linear into creative mode when they get home so they can stop being a jerk to their partners and things. So we tend to have that peak performance group, the neuro focused, kids and adults with brain needs in some way. And then there's the rest of us who want to work on our stress, sleep, attention, and regulate. So it really is everyone with a brain pretty much.
Right.
I mean, this stuff was discovered in 1967 at UCLA.
Wow.
On cats. And cats are very bad instruction followers. This is not like,
I love them.
They're wonderful. But this is a involuntary exercise thing that works whether or not you want it to work. And providers in the field have specialized in working with people in coma, people that are nonverbal, teenagers that don't want to be in your office, and it still works. So, I mean, you've experienced sitting down, putting some wires on, training for half an hour, and feeling a little different afterwards.
Absolutely.
But
right
you
away.
weren't trying to feel different. It just kind of happens. And so a lot of the important part of neurofeedback is working with your coaches to say, "Ooh, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, I liked yesterday's session." Or I don't know, I was kind of wired after that session, kind of too much energy. Or wow, I was way too calm. I was not very present after that session.
I was falling asleep. I couldn't stay awake in the session.
What
is that about?
That particular effect of not being able to stay awake in a session when you're doing beta training, which is what you were doing. Beta is an activation mode, and you saw that you had a lot of slow brain waves, and there was some blue in the right-hand side of the page, which is your beta waves being a bit low. So we were saying to your brain, hey, relax or bring down the slow brain waves and bring up the fast brain waves. And when we were doing that, we were asking for a fast brainwave frequency that was probably above what you were used to. So metaphorically, we just put way too much weight on the bar. And you were like, oh, wait, 2 reps in, wait a minute, this sucks. I mean, it wasn't uncomfortable, but it's a little weird when you're like, whoa, what the heck? My eyes are closing. I can't keep my eyes open. Wow. In neurofeedback, we usually just back off a tiny bit on the beta wave frequency for future reference. And it tends to, within minutes, you're like, oh, okay, this feels better. Because it's not a bad effect. And if you push through that, what happens is you generally wake up with like more fresh energy in a couple hours. It's kind of like working out really hard at the gym, and you leave and you're like, oh, but then 2 hours later, you're like loose and warm and kind of silly and have tons of energy and you're a little hungry.
It's chatty, I guess, so chatty. Like I want to talk about everything. I'm so happy, like after the session.
That's a sign you're pushing your brain hard. You don't need to push it that hard, but you can. And then we tend to watch the subjective experience of sleep, stress, attention, and other stuff every 24 hours afterwards. So the coaches can fine tune the next set of workouts for you. So we're just personal trainers for your brain, but we work on a rather mysterious stuff that people don't usually work on in this way.
So. Well, I'm a trained coach now. I'm a peak brain coach. So if you guys want to learn more about it, I want to make this known and available to everyone that I know. Everyone that I come across, any group that I go to, I just tell them about brain training, about neurofeedback, how this therapy is so effective. There are so many studies I've read, like 15 or more clinical studies that all of them speaks highly about the efficacy of neurofeedback training. It's not like it works for some people, it doesn't work. It works for everybody at different degrees, different levels.
Yeah.
But what is interesting is that in the literature right now, there's no real uniformity in the types of equipment and protocols. So it's kind of hard to compare apples and oranges. But one thing in common is they all improve.
Yeah, and the research is, I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of papers, but they all basically have problems. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is neurofeedback is best done individualized to each person, and you change it as you go. Exactly. So that has not been how the research is done. They do one thing to a group of people, individualized generally. Or, you need very variable people to get different effects across. It's also been, until I did my dissertation work, I tested out the first placebo double-blind controlled methodology in 2009 or 10 is when I was doing that research. And that was the first time you could do double blind placebo-controlled research in EEG. So that's very, very recent. The field's been around for a very long time, 50 plus years. And for most of that time, the insurance companies have been paying doctors to go to like the ADHD meetings and say it didn't work and poison the well at other insurance companies. So there's like a whole like pushback that's kept the neurofeedback in this little fringy space.
Right.
And I started grad school in like 2005, where if I said the word neurofeedback too much, eyes would roll and serious scientists would think I was, it's like using the word consciousness in the 60s. No one thinks you're serious. Now you can research consciousness, but in the 60s, they wouldn't let you into grad school if you used the word consciousness. They think you were, a joke. Yeah. So by the end of my grad program, all these senior scientists were like, oh, neurofeedback? Yeah, we want to do some work with you.
It's cool now.
Yeah, it really is.
It's hip.
And there was a sea change somehow. But on the same token, it's still a little bit of a mysterious space. We like to, we really do like to teach people, not just our coaches like you, Adelita, but we like to help people understand what they're doing as they move through this stuff. So
that's wonderful. So now, how do people get started with you? What kind of deals can we make it available so people are watching and say, okay, that's it. I get it. I want to do this and I'm ready to go now. So
gotcha. So we of course have offices in LA and Orange County, which is where we are, but then St. Louis and New York. And if you guys are near one of the offices, the normal club fee is $500 a year, but Adelita's listeners get it for half price. And
half off.
So it's $250, and you'll get unlimited brain map recordings within reason, but definitely a couple of consults to get in there and dig into your data. And that's, basically a thing you can make use of to help you navigate your own biohacking. Test your nootropics, test your sleep depth, test your different interventions. Brains change slowly, so you don't see much change rapidly. But as you layer interventions for a few months, your brain will pick up those changes over time. And that can be really important to know how things are landing. And then folks will often get equipment and train their brains, and our coaches run with them. So I would say, people can book a free call with us. They can go to the website and grab a free call. They can hit us up on social media with questions and tell us about their fun brain things. But if they tell us they came in through your podcast, they'll get the half price membership. And then that has some other benefits too. Once you're a club member, if you refer in, you can earn some additional sort of free sessions of training.
Yes.
We have mindfulness groups that are offered to our training groups, our club members for free. We are working, I haven't told you this, but we're working on all of the remote training manuals and coach training manuals and removing them to a membership system and a membership website for all of our Peak Brain affiliate coaches worldwide. So we'll have a little members area to log in and learn more about SMR training, alpha theta training, the spot in the head, this feature of research, whatever. So we're creating a whole community for our coaches and affiliates and our training clients to get in there and do more biohacking from this functional neuroscience perspective.
So if you have goals like to improve sleep, improve attention, executive function, mood, stress, all those kinds of things, neurofeedback has been amazing for me. As you can see, the data, there's like tons of studies. And we just have, Dr. Hill, like the top of the food chain here in the industry that is available to work with you. So I suggest that you go get your brain scan, and then the training is fun. You pretty much sit in front of a TV and you watch a video game without the remote control. So how hard is that? You're just kind of watching a video and then you're flying around and crashing cars and just having fun as your brain is improving. So I highly recommend
it works, just so folks are, just to pierce the mystery there a little bit. The way it works is we tie some game to your brain waves. For instance, we want to train down your theta and bring up your beta on the right. So we stuck a wire there and measured your theta and beta. And whenever your brain happens to move itself in the right direction for half a second, the computer game starts to move. So it's gentle, it's passive. We aren't zapping your brain, but it's what's called operant conditioning. We're applauding things that are already happening and they happen more essentially. So
wonderful. So happy to have you. Thank you so much, and be mindful of your time. I'm sure you have a lot of clients and things to do right now, but thanks for everything. We'll set up the links and everything on a description box below, and I'll hope to see you guys in one of the clinics.
Definitely.
Thanks,
Adelita,
Dr.
thanks
Hill.
for having me. Oh, my pleasure. Take care, guys. Talk to you soon.
Have a great day. Ciao.